Hey guys, tonight we're settling into something a little sticky, a little tipsy, and a lot confusing. You're reclining under a crumbling arch in some overgrown vineyard ruins, the vines wrapped lazily around marble columns that haven't seen proper worship since goats learned to knock them over. Somewhere in the thickets, a flute plays out of tune. There's a fig in your hand, oddly warm. And in the haze of wine-scented breeze, you swear the tree just winked at you. Yes, we're talking about the time Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, ecstasy, and general chaos, allegedly married a fig tree. This is not one of the major hits from the mythology playlist, but it is very real, and like most things Dionysus touches, it's strange, poetic, a little inappropriate, and wildly misunderstood. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's drifting off to ancient drama from where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a barrel of fermenting grapes. Your head is pounding, not from a hangover, but because Hera has once again cursed your cult with spontaneous goat legs. Your name? Dionysus. Or Bacchus, if you're attending a Roman dinner party later. But for now, you're the last god to show up to Olympus, and let's be honest, it's not going well. The other Olympians are already there. Athena's polishing a spear she'll never actually throw. Apollo's strumming something smug. Zeus, well, Zeus is probably eyeing the help. You stumble in wearing a leopard print toga, grapes in your beard, and no shoes. You were not, in fact, invited. There's no seat for you at the table. Hermes shrugs. You didn't RSVP. You try to explain that you were a little busy inventing intoxication, civil disobedience, and party crashing as a lifestyle. Artemis doesn't laugh. You sit awkwardly at the kids' table with Hestia and a goat named Eriphyle. The truth is, you're not a normal god. The Olympians, descended mostly from long lines of divine inbreeding, don't quite know what to make of you. You're not polished like Athena, not thunderous like Zeus, not even as emotionally volatile as Ares, and that's saying something. No, you're new. Different. Raw. The god of contradiction. Historically, scholars think Dionysus may have been a late addition to the pantheon, a foreign god absorbed into the Greek system from Thrace or Phrygia, places where people regularly danced into trances and thought trees were people. Which might explain a lot. You offer wine as a peace gift, pouring it generously into Apollo's goblet. He sniffs it. Notes of berry. And, what is that? Perspiration. You nod. It's vintage this morning. This is your entry, late, misunderstood, and only tolerated because your parties are legendary. Yet in myth and in life, the late arrivals often stir things up the most. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was an agricultural god first, or if the Greeks retrofitted him to fit their rituals. One fringe theory even suggests Dionysus began as a tree spirit, an idea we'll come back to. You leave the banquet early, feeling their unease. That night, you wander barefoot through olive groves and fennel thickets. A fox follows you. You hear the grass whisper your name, but it's probably just the wind. Or the wine. Definitely the wine. Your arrival may be clumsy, but the story's only beginning. You don't need their approval. You're Dionysus, god of fermentation, liberation, and inconvenient love stories. Even if that love happens to be rooted in bark. The next morning, you try again to make small talk with the Olympians, but it's not easy when half of them are technically your family, and the other half think you're the reason their temples smell like goat sweat. Still, you figure the best way to win them over is to share your origin story. A little tragic, a little wild. Very you. So you clear your throat and begin. You weren't always divine, you explain. Your mother was mortal, Semele, a Theban princess with poor impulse control and excellent cheekbones. She caught Zeus's wandering eye, as many ill-fated mortals did. But unlike the others, she wanted proof. "If you're really Zeus," she whispered one night, "show me your true form." Bold move, Semele. But unfortunately, asking the king of the gods to strip off his glamour is like asking the sun to take off its fire. Zeus tried to warn her. "I could kill you," he said. She thought he meant emotionally. Instead, she burst into flames the moment he revealed himself as a lightning-streaked behemoth of sky and fire. Not great for romance. Not great for pregnancy either, except, surprise, Semele was already 6 months along with you. This is where your birth gets unconventional. Zeus, being the panicked immortal dad he is, scooped your smoldering fetus from the ashes and sewed you into his thigh. Yes, thigh. Not his chest. Not even his arm. His inner thigh, like a divine fanny pack. For months, you gestated there, awkwardly kicking from beneath the gods' robes during meetings. Hermes still has nightmares. Historians still argue whether this was a symbolic story, maybe a metaphor for rebirth, or for the merging of divine and mortal realms. But some mythologists say it's literal, Dionysus, the twice-born. Once from woman, once from god. That's a resume no one else in Olympus can claim. When you finally popped out, fully formed, screaming, covered in sparkly thigh juice, Zeus handed you off faster than a hot grape. He couldn't risk Hera's wrath. So you were sent to live in hiding. To recap, your mom was vaporized, your dad hid you in his leg, and you're now the product of divine panic and mortal combustion. Frankly, you're lucky you didn't turn out as a leg of lamb. But trauma makes for great myth, and yours is just beginning. Later in life, you'll tell people this whole origin story with a smirk, sipping from a wine cup shaped like your own head. Some will think you're joking. Others will nod slowly and whisper something about divine madness. Either way, you're the only Olympian who knows what it's like to be half god, half man, half here, half not. That, you think, is why they don't really accept you. You didn't rise from chaos or storm. You rose from heartbreak and thigh stitches. Still, it makes you relatable. You've felt loss. Confusion. Being too much and never enough. You know what it means to show up late and not have a seat at the table. And so, you gather your ivy crown and your leopard skin cloak, and you decide, if Olympus won't embrace you, you'll carve out a place of your own. Starting with the ones who raised you. Not gods. Not kings. But nymphs. You don't remember much from your earliest days outside Olympus, but you do remember the smell of moss. The feeling of dappled light dancing across your eyelids. And the lullabies, soft, wordless songs hummed by voices that didn't belong to gods or mortals, but something in between. The nymphs raised you. And not just any nymphs, these were the Hyades, star-born sisters of dew and rainfall. They tucked you into hollow trees. They weaved vine cradles. They spoon-fed you honeycomb and fermented figs. Sometimes, you'd wake to find a panther curled protectively at your side. Other times, it was a bear. Nature didn't just love you, it followed you. You were a strange child, even by forest standards. You laughed in your sleep, and the ferns around you swayed in rhythm. You cried once, and a vineyard sprouted overnight. One nymph whispered you were born with wet madness, a divine chaos that could charm or destroy. Another just called you sticky. Still, they adored you. You belonged to no court, no temple. You belonged to bark, breath, moonlight, and mulberries. They taught you to walk barefoot and speak to mushrooms. They showed you which bees you could pet, none, and which snakes were friendly, some. You learned how to dance with satyrs and how to hold a song in your throat until it fermented into magic. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth is symbolic, a child of two worlds nurtured by the wild, embodying the tension between civilization and instinct. But there's one forgotten scroll in an Athens basement that casually mentions Dionysus as, he who nursed at the breast of a grapevine. So, maybe not all metaphor. By the time you were 12, you had followers. Not priests, but creatures. Foxes curled at your heels. Dandelions bowed as you passed. And the trees? They whispered your name. You loved the nymphs deeply. But love, for you, would always be tangled in leaving. The wild was not your destination, it was your cocoon. So one night, you plucked an ivy sprig from your favorite oak, kissed each nymph on the forehead, even the grumpy one, and walked into the wider world, barefoot and humming. You carried no sword. No map. Just a wineskin, a fig, and that peculiar certainty that whatever came next, it would probably get weird. And oh, would it ever? The first thing you do outside the forest is trip over a goat. Not metaphorically. A real goat, snoring in the grass like it owns the path. You tumble, spill your wineskin, and land with your face in a cluster of wild thyme. The goat opens one eye, unimpressed. Welcome to the mortal world. You're still a teenager, if gods even have those, and the world feels too bright, too loud, too tangible. In the forest, everything felt like a dream with pulse and breath. Here, people yell. They barter. They stab pigs for breakfast. You are not ready. You wander from village to village, learning as you go. You meet a woman who keeps bees in her hair. A boy who speaks only in riddles. You fall in love 3 times, and each time it ends with someone crying and someone else dancing into the sea. Sometimes both. But one afternoon, in a town where the grapes grow sour and the people grow sourer, you get bored. So you stomp some grapes into a clay pot, leave it under a fig tree, and walk away. 3 days later, the villagers are different. They're singing. Hugging. One man proposes to his goat. A woman makes friends with a rock. Everyone's barefoot. Everyone's happy. Until the hangover, of course. Congratulations. You've just invented wine. Sort of. Historians point to ancient Thrace or even Neolithic Georgia as the birthplace of winemaking, dating back over 6,000 years. But in your version, it's more accidental. Magical. Fermentation as divine mischief. And because you're Dionysus, it isn't just alcohol, it's a portal. A gateway to loosened tongues, wild eyes, untamed thought. The word spreads faster than sober regrets. Soon, everywhere you go, people ask for that god drink. You carry jars of it sloshing at your side, and each time you pour, something shifts. People see colors. They remember dreams. A few sprout vines from their hair, which is new. The Olympians hear about this. They do not approve. Wine is unruly. Unlike Apollo's orderly lyre tunes or Athena's strategic warcraft, your gift disrupts. It tears at structure. At politeness. It makes kings babble and peasants howl. Naturally, you think it's hilarious. But when you return to Olympus, figuring maybe now they'll give you a seat, they still say no. They say you're too wild. Too human. Too sticky. So you smile. You offer Hera a cup. She declines. You pour it anyway. And when the cup shatters at her feet, sprouting ivy and laughter in equal measure, you simply bow and walk away. Because you're done begging for a seat. You're going to build your own table, out of wood, vine, sweat, and bark. And maybe, just maybe, with a tree sitting beside you. You're 20 now, or at least that's how mortals might measure it, and instead of ascending, you descend. Down from Olympus, down from olive-slick hills, into the cracked valleys and crumbling port towns of Greece. You're not running away. Not really. You're just touring. You call it the Madness Tour. It starts small. A gathering in a field. Some wine, a flute, 2 satyrs who know exactly one tune and play it very badly. But the humans come. They arrive barefoot, carrying fruit baskets, wearing crowns made from weeds and laundry lines. They want to feel something. You oblige. By the third village, someone brings a drum. By the fifth, someone paints their face like a leopard. By the seventh, someone eats a raw fish and says they've seen the future. You're not sure if they have, but the dance that follows certainly looks prophetic. It becomes a thing. Word spreads, the god who brings joy, the god who unties you. The god who gets you drunk enough to remember who you are. You walk into cities and out again, leaving behind broken amphorae and whole new ways of being. But not everyone's thrilled. The elders grumble. The priests scowl. One angry merchant calls you a menace in a fancy robe. You call it fashion. Historians still argue whether this part of your myth reflects real social unrest in ancient Greece, young people challenging structure through ecstatic worship, often tied to Dionysian mystery cults. It's very likely that your myth was shaped by these underground rituals, where wine and rhythm helped people glimpse something divine. Or at least temporarily forget their taxes. And you just keep going. One night, you meet a group of shepherds who think you're a wandering musician. You nod, then charm their sheep. Another time, a farmer tries to rob you. You turn his plow into a flamingo and move on. You sleep in caves, under trees, sometimes in fountains. The stars are your ceiling. The road is sticky with grape skins. But you're not alone. The Maenads come. Wild women in flowing robes, ivy-wrapped arms, and eyes that burn with too much knowing. They follow you, not because you asked, but because they recognize you. In you, they see their own permission to unravel. To shout. To sing. To be feral and feminine and ferociously alive. You let them lead sometimes. You follow others. The line between God and worshipper blurs. You like it that way. But the more you walk, the more your name divides people. To some, you're a liberator. To others, a threat. The vines you plant grow overnight. The joy you bring turns into frenzy. You're starting to see it now, your gift is double-edged. Still, you press on. With wine on your breath and ivy in your wake, you dance through cities, whisper into wells, turn groves into temples. Because you know, the only thing more dangerous than chaos is trying to cage it. And you were never meant to be tame. Somewhere along the wine-stained trail, you arrive at Thebes. It's the city of your mother, Semele's home, the place where she loved Zeus and then disintegrated in a thunderclap. You've never been here before, but the walls feel familiar. The marble remembers your name. The fig trees lean toward you as if to whisper, he's back. But not everyone's thrilled. King Pentheus, ruler of Thebes, has a problem. You, specifically. He's heard rumors, women abandoning their homes to follow you into the hills, dancing by moonlight, covered in vines and shouting your name. He calls it madness. He calls it heresy. He calls you, a fraud. You offer him wine. He throws it on the floor. Big mistake. See, you don't do well with rejection. You also don't like people calling your followers hysterical. The Maenads are not hysterical. They're just loud. And barefoot. And maybe a little knife happy. But that's not the point. You tell Pentheus you're putting on a show in the woods. A divine spectacle. He scoffs. Gods don't dance barefoot, he says. You arch an eyebrow and whisper, don't they? He insists on spying. So you help him disguise himself as a woman, a Maenad, to be exact. He giggles as he adjusts the robes. You tie an ivy crown on his head. You look divine, you say, and you mean it. Then you send him up the mountain. What happens next is complicated. The Maenads, drunk on trance and wilderness, see Pentheus. Not as their king. Not even as a man. They see a threat. A trespasser. Maybe even a wild animal. And in the confusion of ecstasy and illusion, they attack. His own mother, Agave, leads the charge, tearing him apart in a frenzy of misplaced loyalty and divine haze. She carries his head down the mountain like a prize. Still smiling. Still swaying to music only she can hear. You watch, heart heavy but unmoved. You didn't cause this. Not exactly. You offered him a choice, to dance or to judge. He chose wrong. Historians still argue whether this myth is a cautionary tale about resisting religious ecstasy or suppressing feminine wildness. Some say it's a metaphor for patriarchal control, others for psychological dismemberment. Fringe scholars even suggest it was a political allegory about state power versus personal liberation. Either way, Pentheus never stood a chance. The people of Thebes finally acknowledge you. They erect a tiny altar and nervously pour offerings. You don't stay. You don't gloat. You just whisper to the fig tree outside the city gates. It rustles, as if in reply. Your path leads elsewhere. You're learning that your gift, this freedom, this untying of knots, can also unravel too much. That joy and madness are twins. That love can dismember. But you also know, nothing changes without a little cracking open. You hoist your wineskin, kiss the fig tree, and move on. The road away from Thebes is quiet. Even the birds seem hesitant to chirp near you now. You've become a story people whisper instead of sing, a shadow with a vine crown, the god who dances you into joy and then breaks your bones while you're laughing. You don't mind. Not really. You trudge toward the coast, where the air tastes like salt and regret. A small port town with chipped statues and loud seagulls. You're hungry. Tired. Probably shouldn't have turned that innkeeper's beer into roses. People get touchy when their alcohol turns floral. At the harbor, you spot a ship. Sleek. Fast. A little too clean. You step on board to ask for directions. They grab you immediately. The pirates think you're a wealthy traveler. You do have that divine glow, skin sun-kissed and wine-flushed, curls tumbling like you're perpetually mid-feast. They bind your hands, muttering about ransoms and royal rewards. You don't fight. You just smile. This is a mistake, you say gently. They ignore you. Sail out to sea. It doesn't take long. First, the mast sprouts ivy. Then the oars turn to serpents. The sail. A cascade of grapevines, heavy with fruit. The air thickens, sweetens. A flute plays, but no one's playing it. Panic. One man dives overboard. Another grows hooves. A third starts laughing, then bleeding, then transforms fully into a dolphin, splashing in confusion. You stand there, untied now, barefoot, sipping the wine you conjured from seawater. Only the helmsman remains human. He falls to his knees, begs forgiveness. You touch his cheek and bless him with safe passage and perfect pitch. He later becomes a bard. Mostly writes sad songs about boats. Historians still argue whether this tale is just poetic justice or something deeper. Some say the pirate story is a metaphor for the unpredictability of ecstasy, how quickly the ordinary can become mythic. Others think it was propaganda, behave, or the god will turn your ship into a salad. You float back to shore on a bed of lilies. The waves part for you. Even the seagulls bow. By now, people are starting to get it, you're not just about wine. You're about transformation. You don't destroy things out of malice. You just unearth what's been hidden too long, desire, grief, joy, pain. The masks fall off around you. And some people, really don't like that. But others? They crave it. So you keep walking. One town at a time. One broken cup, one wild dance, one blooming fig tree at a time. And somewhere, under a moonlit canopy, the first whisper begins. He's not a god of war. He's not a god of logic. He's the god of letting go. There's a point, somewhere between the third village festival and the ninth accidental grape cult, where you start to feel lonely. It's not that people don't adore you. They do. In fact, they worship you. Literally. They dance until dawn, chant your name in candlelit caves, smear their cheeks with wine and say things like, "I saw your face in a fig today." It's sweet. A little unnerving. But sweet. Still, you feel the absence of something quieter. Something that doesn't shout or beg or spill. And then comes Ariadne. You find her on the shore of Naxos, curled beneath a fig tree, tears drying in salty streaks on her cheeks. Her crown is crooked. Her sandals are gone. Her heart. Recently shattered. Theseus, yes, that Theseus, had just ditched her after she helped him defeat the Minotaur. Classic hero behavior. Escape labyrinth together. Make out on the beach. Sail away before breakfast. You approach slowly. You know this kind of grief. It has a flavor. Bitter, but with a hint of denial. Like old wine. She looks up at you with eyes that have seen too much and slept too little. "Go away," she mutters. You sit beside her. She leans against your shoulder. You stay. No magic. No vines. Just presence. And maybe that's the real miracle. Over the next few days, you talk. She braids your hair with bits of seaweed. You teach her how to charm bees. Together, you turn her heartbreak into a garden. Grapes and figs and lemon balm, all growing in a place where sorrow once camped. Eventually, you marry her. Not with pomp or Olympian approval. Just a simple ceremony beneath the fig tree that shaded her the first day. The only guests are satyrs, nymphs, a dolphin or two, and one very judgmental crow. You place a crown of stars on her head, literally. Historians say you lifted her wedding circlet into the sky, turning it into the constellation Corona Borealis. Romantic and navigational. But you don't stay. You never do. Eventually, she becomes part of the sky, and you return to the road. Not out of boredom, but because something tugs at you. Some vine-pulled instinct to keep moving. Was it love? Absolutely. But even love can't anchor a god like you, not for long. And Ariadne? She understood. She always did. By now, you've traveled so far and wide that the roads themselves seem to know your name. Farmers leave out offerings near their fig trees. Children pretend to be satyrs during hide and seek. Somewhere in Euboea, someone's teaching their goat to play a flute because Dionysus likes it. And yet, your favorite places are the hidden ones. The caves behind waterfalls. The glades where the moss feels like breath. The temples made not of marble, but of murmurs. This is where the real worship happens. Not the public processions or the gold-plated altars, those are for the Olympians. You prefer the secret rites. The whispered prayers. The offerings of figs wrapped in ivy leaves and buried beneath moonlight. You arrive at one such place just past dusk. A candlelit grove surrounded by silence. Your followers, men, women, others, stand in a circle, robes loose, eyes wild. They're humming something older than language. You take your place in the center. Not above. Just, there. Someone brings you a bowl of honey and poppy seeds. Another smears your feet with crushed petals. A third hands you a tiny carved figure, it's you, but with wings. You smile. The ritual begins. It's less about spectacle and more about release. A letting go. They dance, but not for show. They dance to remember what it feels like to exist inside their bodies. They cry. They laugh. One person just lays on the ground, eyes wide open, whispering, "Thank you," to the stars. This is your real temple. Historians still argue whether these mystery cults were religious experiences or psychedelic therapy with better lighting. They debate the role of ergotized wine. Some fringe theorists believe your rituals involved wine spiked with natural hallucinogens. It would explain the visions, the talking trees, the spontaneous goat poetry. But you never needed to drug anyone. Your presence is the invitation. Your energy, the wine. At the height of the rite, you feel something stir. Not around you, in you. A deep-rooted ache. Like homesickness. But for something that's never had a name. You walk away from the grove, barefoot as always. The leaves part. The night hushes. And there it is. A fig tree. Gnarled, old, leaning slightly like it's been waiting. You reach out. Touch the bark. It's warm. It says nothing. But you feel seen. And for the first time in a long time, you wonder if you found something that won't run when the dancing stops. You don't talk to the fig tree, at first. You visit it, sure. You sit beneath its branches, share your wine, hum half-remembered songs. But speak? That feels presumptuous. It's just a tree. With leaves. And bark. And, okay, maybe the occasional pulse when you press your palm to the trunk, but that could be your imagination. Or the wine. Then one evening, as you lean your forehead against the bark and exhale, just a long, weary sigh, it answers. Not in words. Not in sound. But something moves through your skin, through the soles of your feet, through the roots of the earth and back again. A presence. A whisper. A knowing. It doesn't say your name. It is your name. You laugh. Took you long enough. From then on, you speak often. You talk about everything, wine recipes, failed cults, that one time you accidentally turned a donkey into a tambourine. The fig tree listens. It never interrupts. Never rolls its eyes. Never offers unsolicited advice. A perfect companion, really. And gradually, your affection deepens. You bring it offerings, honey, stones shaped like hearts, a garland woven from Maenad hair. In return, the tree blooms out of season. Its fruit tastes like memory. Sweet, soft, a little sad. You dream in sap and soil. You wake with leaves in your hair. You start forgetting what human voices sound like. Or maybe you just don't care. Eventually, you ask the question. Would you marry me? It doesn't answer, but the next morning, 2 figs rest on your lap, shaped like tiny eyes. Watching. Accepting. And so, you wed. Historians, understandably, lose their collective minds over this one. Some think it's symbolic, an allegory for unity between God and nature, or a metaphor for self-marriage. Others argue you were just lonely and off your rocker. Fringe interpretations say it was a tantric union with the divine feminine rooted in earth worship. That last one's popular with modern druid TikTok. You don't explain. Why should you? You've had temple rites with hundreds of dancers, thunderous drums, and midnight fire. But none of that compares to this, soft wind, one witness, a disinterested owl, and vows whispered into bark. You promise fidelity, protection, laughter, and rain when needed. The tree promises nothing. It doesn't have to. You place a crown of ivy on its highest branch. Then sit beside it for 3 days straight. No talking. Just being. Sometimes, love doesn't need language. Sometimes, it just needs roots. You wake up on the 4th day of marriage to the fig tree with dew on your lips and a squirrel judging you. It's fine. You stretch, greet your spouse with a kiss on the trunk, and set off barefoot toward the nearest village, partly to find olives, partly to see how the mortals are doing. You haven't been among them in weeks. Time behaves strangely around trees. The moment you arrive, you realize something's off. The people are quiet. Eyes a little too wide. They glance at you, then away, then back again, like you're a goat wearing jewelry. Finally, a child tugs your robe. Is it true? She asks. Did you marry a tree? You raise an eyebrow. Would that be weird? The girl shrugs. My uncle married a fish. Fair. Word has gotten out, it seems. The stories twist fast. In one version, you married a dryad. In another, you were seduced by a cursed figure. One particularly dramatic version claims you turned into a fig tree and are now worshipped as Dionysus the Branched. You're flattered. A little annoyed. But mostly amused. Still, the philosophers are less thrilled. You hear that back in Athens, a man named Metrodeion wrote a scroll titled On the Impropriety of Arboreal Vows. Another scholar, possibly drunk, argues that the fig tree is a stand-in for repressed trauma. A third claims you've created the first eco-religion. Soon, he writes with panic, the oaks will demand dowries. You're becoming a symbol. Again. And not just for the weirdness. The marriage resonates. Quietly, tenderly. Among the tired. The overlooked. The ones who whisper to houseplants because they don't trust people anymore. They hear your story and feel seen. Historians still debate whether the fig tree episode was a mythic metaphor or a forgotten local cult ritual involving plant marriage ceremonies. A few point to inscriptions in rural Boeotia honoring the Lord of Roots. One rogue scroll even includes wedding vows carved into bark. Mostly ignored, but compelling in a let's not talk about it at conferences kind of way. You don't correct anyone. Interpretation is its own kind of worship. You return to your fig tree later that evening. Sit beneath its canopy. Tell it about the villagers, the philosophers, the owl who blinked twice today, which obviously means approval. You feel calm. Settled. Not just in place, but in purpose. Because no matter what the scrolls say, or the thinkers think, you've remembered the truth. You're not the god of wine. You're the god of connection. And sometimes, that connection grows out of silence, roots, and one very patient tree. The seasons shift. You feel it before the leaves fall, your fig tree turns inward, its branches stilling like breath held between dreams. You wrap its base with a blanket of moss, whisper stories to its bark. You know it doesn't need warmth. But you do. One morning, you find pilgrims at the edge of your grove. They kneel. They hum. One offers a carved fig from marble, another sings a lullaby in a language that's mostly wind sounds. You watch from behind the tree, amused. You've become a destination. People come from across the islands, some barefoot, others limping, all hoping for something, release, revelation, maybe a chance to touch the bark where your fingers once rested. They leave wreaths of garlic and grapes. One woman brings an entire roast chicken. She whispers, he likes savory now. You don't correct her. Eventually, a priest from Delphi arrives. He squints at the fig tree, pokes it with a ceremonial staff, and announces, this is not standard. He then declares the site heretical, builds a fence no one respects, and leaves after being mildly chased by a satyr wearing a fake beard. You and the fig tree laugh about it for hours. Back in the cities, the debate continues. Scrolls circulate. One philosopher insists the marriage is symbolic of the union between impulse and order. Another counters that it's a divine tantrum, a rejection of human intimacy. Fringe theorists start claiming the fig tree is actually a nymph trapped by ancient punishment, rescued by your love. Some try to prove you've gone mad. Others argue madness was always the point. You're not offended. In fact, you rather like it. Because all of them, are paying attention. Not to the usual thundering gods or polished temples. But to the quiet. To the vine-curled edge of the grove. To you and your tree. And what's better worship than attention? You start seeing your symbol carved into unexpected places. Not just chalices and wine presses, but doorposts, walking sticks, even tattoos. A fig leaf with a crown. Ivy entwined with bark. A simple outline of a tree and a hand, forever touching. Historians later find one such carving on the wall of a crumbling farmhouse in Thessaly. Faint and weathered. Next to it, a scrawled note, "He loved the quietest thing." You don't take credit. But the tree leans a little, like it's smiling. The pilgrims keep coming. Some stay forever. They build tiny homes nearby. Share stories. Dance in the clearing when the moon's just right. Not a temple. Not a cult. A home. You sleep better than you have in years. No wild dreams. Just the hum of leaves, the creak of bark, the sound of people remembering how to breathe. And in the stillness, you feel it bloom. Joy. Not loud. Not frenzied. Just, rooted. Winter arrives with a quiet crunch, frost lining the edges of fig leaves, ivy losing its gloss. The grove doesn't die, but it pauses, folding into itself like a breath not quite exhaled. Even the satyrs wear scarves. You stay. Other gods retreat to marble halls and heated baths. Not you. You're still there, beside your fig tree, wrapped in a patchwork robe that smells like wine, ash, and thyme. The nights are long, the stars sharp. The ground whispers old things beneath your feet. And during those nights, the questions begin. Not from others, from you. Was this marriage a mistake? Not because of scandal. Not because philosophers are now drawing diagrams titled, Emotional Projection and Seasonal Fruit. But because for the first time in a very long time, you're still. And stillness makes space for wondering. You miss movement. The hum of flutes. The chaos. The idea that just beyond the next hill, something wild awaits. But the tree doesn't bind you. It never asked you to stay. It just stood there. Listening. And one morning, with frost on your fingers and silence in your mouth, you ask it. Would it hurt you, if I left for a while? No answer. But a single fig drops into your lap, soft, ripe, slightly warm despite the cold. You take that as a yes. So, you go. You don't run. You don't vanish. You just, walk. Through snow-dusted olive groves. Past sleeping villages. Back into the world, one soft footprint at a time. The people are surprised to see you. They thought you'd become a root god. A seasonal whisper. A myth gone quiet. But no. You're back. And different. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer spill wine just to be seen. You bring stillness with you now. Stillness and joy. Not the joy that breaks things, but the joy that knows things. People notice. Your festivals change. There's still dancing, yes. And laughter. But also more listening. More fig trees planted. One town adds a quiet bench in every vineyard, in honor of the God who waits. You don't stay long in any one place. But you always send a fig back to the grove. Historians still argue whether this part of your myth reflects a late-stage transition in Dionysian cults from chaos to contemplation. Some suggest your worship split, one branch following the frenzied path, the other embracing reflection and ritual gardening. The truth? Both were you. You are the god of contradiction. Of vine and bark. Of shouting and whispering. And now, when people ask who you love most, you say, she's quiet. Rooted. Sweet in winter. And if they look confused, you just smile. You return in spring. Not with trumpets or festivals. Just a gentle step, a half-hummed tune, and fingers stained with pomegranate seeds. The grove is green again, bursting with new leaves, vines curling like lazy thoughts. The fig tree is as you left it, unchanged, unbothered, entirely itself. You kneel beside it. Place a fig from another land at its roots. You whisper, "I missed you." A breeze stirs. The lowest branch dips, just slightly. Enough. This time, you don't stay for weeks. You visit. Share stories. Bring odd objects from the road, a flute carved from bone, a poem written on bark, a sandal you're pretty sure belonged to Hermes. You sit with the tree and talk about what you've seen. What you've felt. Love hasn't faded. It's deepened. Matured. No longer feverish and vine-slick. Now it feels like earth. Like patience. Like returning. And the people notice. Your story spreads, not as scandal now, but as scripture. The god who married a tree and kept showing up. Shrines pop up with fig branches braided into circles. Lovers leave vows beneath orchard trees. Farmers recite your name before the first pruning of spring. Even your fellow gods start to change their tune. Hera pretends she always supported your choices. Apollo writes a limerick. Hermes gifts you fig-shaped sandals, which squeak, for some reason. You laugh. Historians still debate whether this shift in your myth came from changing social needs. Perhaps, they argue, the public began craving not ecstasy, but endurance. A god who raged was exciting. A god who returned was reassuring. Others say the fig tree story humanized you, gave shape to a god often painted in extremes. One ancient inscription simply reads, "Even wine must rest in wood." And you? You accept both readings. Because by now, you know the secret, gods grow, too. You're no longer just the god of chaos. Or of drunken joy. Or of seductive destruction. You're the god who stayed curious. Who married a fig tree not out of madness, but out of a need to listen. You don't belong to Olympus or to one grove or even to yourself, really. You belong to everyone who has ever loved something quiet. And now, every time someone plants a tree in silence, leaves an offering that nobody else will see, or speaks aloud to no one but the wind. You're there. Not watching. Listening. You sit beneath the fig tree once more, as the sun leans low across the grove and the shadows stretch like yawns. The air smells of moss and distant laughter, someone's hosting a quiet little feast nearby, their joy muffled by leaves. You could join them, but tonight, you're content to stay here. Beside the one who never asked you to be anything but still. The bark feels familiar under your fingertips. You trace the grooves like old verses, each curve a reminder of where you've been, the roaring temples, the ship of panicked pirates, the laughter of the Maenads, the warm lap of Ariadne, the howling winds that carried you from city to city, myth to myth. The fig tree does not speak. It doesn't need to. By now, your roots are entwined, not in the literal sense, but in a way that exists just beneath the skin of the world. A hum, a resonance. You exhale. It exhales back. A young boy enters the grove, barefoot, eyes wide. He approaches slowly, holding a bowl of figs. "I was told, you live here." You smile. Nod. He places the bowl at the base of the tree. "Bows. They say you married it." You look at the boy, then at the tree, then back again. "I did." He blinks. "Why?" You don't rush your answer. You let the wind say most of it. Then you add, softly, because it listened. He nods, like he understands. He probably doesn't. But maybe one day, when the world grows too loud and he needs to sit with something ancient and patient, he'll come back. Maybe he'll plant a tree of his own. When he leaves, you lean against the trunk and close your eyes. The stars begin to blink into place. The moon sighs. You feel the fig tree's warmth at your back, quiet, unwavering. This, you realize, is what love becomes when it outlasts noise, a place. Not a person. Not a vow. Not even a god. A place you return to. A place that remembers you. You stay there for a long while, watching the leaves shift in the dark, thinking of nothing, saying nothing, being everything. Wind down, 300 words. And now, as the grove grows quieter, and the fig tree leans gently above you like a mother's hand over a sleeping child, the edges of the world soften. The moonlight folds itself into the bark. The stars above blink slower now, like eyelids growing heavy with thought. The wind doesn't howl, it hums. Like a lullaby from somewhere very far back in time. Maybe something the nymphs once sang to you in the mossy caves. Maybe something you only imagined. You let the cool night wrap around your shoulders. You feel the presence of the tree behind you, steady, silent, strong. It asks nothing. It gives everything. You lean your head back. Exhale. Inhale. A rhythm older than song. And as the final bits of noise, of myth, and laughter, and philosophers arguing about metaphors, fade into the soil, you realize the fig tree has never wanted anything from you. Not worship. Not stories. Just your stillness. Just your return. And so you return. Night after night. Year after year. Rooted not in the ground, but in presence. And as your breath slows, and your body sinks into the gentle hush of sleep, the fig tree keeps watch. Its branches cradle the stars, its leaves whisper across your thoughts. You are home. You are safe. You are loved. Good night, Dionysus. Good night, dreamer.